Have you ever heard a sound in the middle of the night that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up? A sound that seemed ordinary at first, but the longer you listened, the more wrong it felt. Maybe it was a voice calling your name when no one was around. Maybe it was footsteps outside your window long after midnight. Or maybe it was a whistle drifting through the darkness from a place where no one should have been. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy terrifying horror stories, paranormal encounters, Appalachian legends, and unexplained mysteries that blur the line between reality and nightmare, then you're in the right place. Tonight's story comes from the mountains of West Virginia, where locals have passed down the same warning for generations. It is a warning so simple that most outsiders laugh when they hear it. Never whistle back into the woods. No matter how close the sound seems. No matter how familiar it feels. Because if you answer the whistle, something in the darkness will answer you back. And once it learns your voice, it may decide to follow you home. This is the story of the whistling thing in Black Hollow. Nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia lies a forgotten stretch of forest known as Black Hollow. It isn't marked on most maps. There are no tourist signs, no scenic overlooks, and no hiking trails advertised online. The people who live nearby rarely mention it, and when they do, it is usually with lowered voices and uneasy glances toward the tree line. Black Hollow has always been different. Even on bright afternoons, the woods seem darker there. The air feels heavier. Sounds travel strangely through the valley. Many locals claim the forest itself is alive in ways that cannot be explained. For generations, parents in nearby communities taught their children one important rule. If you hear a whistle coming from Black Hollow after sunset, do not whistle back. Most children obeyed because they were afraid. Most adults obeyed because they knew better. Ethan Carter did not. In the fall of 1998, Ethan returned home after spending 2 years away at college in Charleston. At 21 years old, he considered himself practical and rational. Ghost stories were entertaining, but nothing more. He had grown up hearing strange tales about Black Hollow, stories involving missing hunters, strange lights among the trees, and mysterious whistles that seemed to come from nowhere. As a child, those stories had frightened him. As an adult, they seemed ridiculous. On his first night home, Ethan sat on the wooden porch with his parents. The evening was cool and peaceful. A gentle breeze rustled through the distant hills while crickets sang from the fields surrounding the property. The sky had darkened to a deep blue, and stars slowly began appearing overhead. That was when Ethan heard it. A whistle. Soft. Distant. Barely noticeable beneath the sounds of the night. At first, he thought it was another bird call. Then it came again. A long, slow whistle drifting through the darkness beyond the trees. Ethan turned toward the forest. "Did you hear that?" he asked. His father's reaction was immediate. The older man's face lost all color. "Go inside." Ethan laughed. "What? Go inside? Right now?" The seriousness in his father's voice caught him off guard. "It was just somebody whistling." "No," his father replied quietly. "It wasn't." The whistle sounded again. This time it seemed slightly closer. Neither of Ethan's parents said another word. His mother stood and quietly closed the porch door. The atmosphere changed instantly. What had been a pleasant family evening became tense and uncomfortable. No one explained why. Later that night, Ethan asked his father about the whistle. His father hesitated before answering. "People around here know better than to answer it." "Answer what?" "The thing in Black Hollow." Ethan rolled his eyes. "You seriously believe that?" His father stared at him for several seconds. Then he said something Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. "I don't know what it is. But I know it isn't human." The next day Ethan visited several old friends. He casually brought up the legend while they sat outside a gas station drinking coffee. The reaction was always the same. Nervous smiles. Awkward silence. Quick attempts to change the subject. Only one person seemed willing to discuss it. An elderly man named Walter Briggs. Walter had lived near Black Hollow for nearly 60 years. He had heard every local legend and witnessed enough strange events that few people questioned his stories anymore. When Ethan mentioned the whistle, Walter became unusually serious. "If you hear it, don't answer." "Why not?" "Because it learns." Ethan laughed. "It learns what?" "Your voice." Walter's expression never changed. "Once it knows your voice, it starts following you." That evening Ethan decided to prove everyone wrong. Just before sunset, he grabbed an old video camera, a flashlight, and a small audio recorder. Then he drove to the edge of Black Hollow. The forest looked ordinary enough. Towering oak trees stretched toward the darkening sky. Fallen leaves covered the ground. The fading sunlight cast long shadows between the trunks. Nothing about the place seemed supernatural. For nearly 30 minutes he heard nothing unusual. Then the whistle came. Long, slow, melancholy. The sound drifted through the trees like a distant melody. Ethan smiled. Finally. He raised his camera and began recording. Then he did the one thing every local had warned him not to do. He whistled back. The sound echoed into the forest. For a moment nothing happened. The woods became completely silent. Even the crickets stopped singing. Then a whistle answered him. Exactly the same. Every note. Every pause. Every tiny detail. It sounded like a perfect recording of his own whistle being played back to him. Ethan's smile faded. He whistled again. The response came instantly. Again, it was identical. Not close. Not similar. Perfect. As though something hidden among the trees was mimicking him flawlessly. A chill ran through his body. For the first time that night, he felt uneasy. Then the whistle came again without any invitation. Closer. Much closer. Ethan froze. The sound no longer seemed to originate deep within the woods. Now it sounded as if it were only a short distance away. Perhaps 50 feet. Maybe less. He quickly aimed his flashlight into the darkness. Nothing. Only trees. Shadows. And drifting patches of fog. Still, the feeling remained. The unmistakable sensation that someone was watching him. Not from one direction. From everywhere. The whistle came again. Closer than before. Slow. Patient. Almost playful. Like something enjoying a game. Suddenly Ethan no longer wanted to be there. He lowered the camera and began walking back toward his truck. The whistle followed. Each time he glanced over his shoulder, the sound seemed to shift locations. Always staying just out of sight. Always maintaining the same distance. Never approaching. Never falling behind. Following. Watching. Waiting. When he finally reached home and stepped inside, the whistle stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt worse. Because it felt intentional. As though something had reached the edge of his property and decided to remain there. Listening. Ethan tried to convince himself it was his imagination. Yet before going to bed, he reviewed the footage from his camera. At first everything appeared normal. The forest. The whistle. His nervous laughter. Then he noticed something in the background. A figure. Standing between two trees. Far behind him. Tall. Unnaturally tall. Its body appeared thin and elongated. Its limbs seemed too long for any human being. Most disturbing of all, the figure appeared completely motionless. It simply stood there. Watching him. Ethan paused the video. His heart began pounding. He did not remember seeing anyone in the forest. He zoomed in. The image became grainy and distorted. But the figure remained visible. A dark silhouette with proportions that made no sense. Then the screen flickered. For a fraction of a second the image blurred. And when it returned, the figure was gone. Ethan replayed the footage 3 times. The result never changed. The thing appeared. Watched him. Then vanished. The following morning he returned to the same location. Daylight should have made everything feel normal again. Instead, it made things worse. Near the exact spot where he had stood the previous night, he discovered footprints in the damp soil. At first glance they resembled human footprints. But they were wrong. Far too long. Far too narrow. And spaced impossibly far apart. The distance between each print suggested a stride no ordinary person could make. Ethan followed them. The tracks circled the area where he had been standing. Then headed away from the forest. His stomach tightened. Because the footprints weren't leading deeper into Black Hollow. They were leading toward town. Toward his house. Toward him. For nearly half a mile he followed the tracks. The farther he went, the more terrified he became. Eventually the footprints reached his family's property. Then continued across the yard. Right up to the side of the house. And finally stopped beneath his bedroom window. As Ethan stared at the ground, a terrible realization settled over him. Whatever had answered his whistle the previous night had not stayed in Black Hollow. It had followed him home. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the worst part was still to come. Because if the stories were true, the thing had already learned his voice. And now it knew exactly where to find him. Ethan stood frozen beneath his bedroom window, staring at the strange footprints pressed into the damp earth. For several moments, he couldn't move. The morning air felt colder than it should have, and the sounds of birds and distant traffic seemed strangely muted, as though the world itself had become quieter around him. Slowly, he looked up at the window. His window. The same window he had slept beside for nearly 18 years. The same window that had been only a few feet away from whatever had stood there during the night. A knot formed in his stomach. Trying to calm himself, Ethan forced a nervous laugh. There had to be an explanation. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Perhaps a hunter or a group of local teenagers had heard that he went into Black Hollow and decided to scare him. That explanation made sense. At least it made more sense than the alternative. Yet even as he tried convincing himself, one detail continued to bother him. The footprints ended directly beneath his bedroom window. There were no footprints leading away. He searched the yard, the nearby grass, and the dirt road beyond the property. Nothing. It was as though whatever had stood there had simply vanished into thin air. That night, Ethan locked every door in the house and checked every window twice before going to bed. His mother noticed his unusual behavior and asked if something was wrong. For a moment he considered telling her everything. Instead, he forced a smile and blamed it on being tired. His mother studied him carefully before nodding, but he could tell she didn't believe him. As midnight approached, sleep refused to come. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the old house creaked softly around him. Every sound felt louder than normal. Every shifting shadow seemed suspicious. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, he finally began drifting toward sleep. Then he heard it. A whistle. Soft. Slow. Almost playful. It came from outside his window. Ethan's eyes snapped open instantly. For several seconds he remained completely still, listening. His heart pounded so hard he could hear blood rushing through his ears. The whistle came again. This time it sounded closer. Close enough that it seemed as though whoever made it was standing directly beneath the window. His entire body went rigid. Slowly, carefully, he sat up in bed. The room remained dark except for pale moonlight shining through the curtains. The whistle sounded a third time. Long. Patient. Waiting. Ethan reached for the baseball bat he kept beside his bed. Every instinct told him not to look outside. Yet curiosity slowly overcame fear. Moving as quietly as possible, he stepped toward the window. The whistle stopped. The sudden silence felt even worse. His trembling hand grasped the curtain. For several long seconds he hesitated. Then he pulled it aside. The yard was empty. No person. No animal. Nothing. Only moonlight stretching across the grass. Ethan released a shaky breath. Maybe he really was imagining things. Maybe the stress and lack of sleep were beginning to affect him. Then he noticed the fog. A thin layer of mist had gathered across the yard. At first it seemed normal. But after a moment he realized something wasn't right. The fog wasn't moving with the wind. It was moving toward the house. Slowly. Deliberately. Almost as if it had a destination. The mist crept across the grass like a living thing. And somewhere inside it came another whistle. This time it was so close that it sounded as though it came from directly outside the glass. Ethan stumbled backward. His heart nearly stopped. Because he suddenly realized something horrifying. The whistle was no longer coming from the yard. It was coming from the other side of the window at eye level. As though something tall enough to reach the second floor was standing there watching him. For a brief moment, a shape appeared within the fog. It was only an outline. Dark. Human-like. Yet horribly wrong. Its body seemed unnaturally tall. Its limbs appeared too long. Its head tilted slightly to one side, almost as if it were studying him. Curious. Interested. Amused. Then the shape vanished back into the mist. Panicking, Ethan switched on his bedroom light. The yard instantly appeared normal again. The fog was gone. The figure was gone. And the whistle had disappeared. The next morning, Ethan tried convincing himself it had all been exhaustion. A lack of sleep. An overactive imagination fueled by old stories. But deep down he knew better. Something had been outside his window. Something had been watching him. And whatever it was getting closer. Over the next several days, strange things began happening around town. At first they seemed unrelated. A dog disappeared from a nearby farm. Then another. A hunter reported hearing someone mimic his voice deep in the woods despite being completely alone. An elderly woman claimed she heard her dead husband calling her name from outside her porch shortly after midnight. Nobody wanted to discuss these incidents openly, yet everyone was talking about them in quiet conversations behind closed doors. The old stories about Black Hollow were beginning to surface again. 3 nights later, Ethan was sitting alone in his room when his phone suddenly rang. The caller ID displayed a number he didn't recognize. Curious, he answered. Hello? For several seconds there was only silence. No breathing. No static. Nothing. Then a voice finally spoke. His voice. Hello? Ethan nearly dropped the phone. For a moment he thought there was some kind of echo on the line. Then the voice spoke again. Hello, Ethan. Every word sounded exactly like him. Not similar. Not close. Perfect. Every tone, every pause, every subtle inflection matched his own voice flawlessly. It was as if he were listening to a recording of himself. The call disconnected. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. His hands trembled uncontrollably. Someone hadn't merely imitated his voice. Someone had copied it. The following day he drove straight to Walter Briggs' house. The old man listened carefully while Ethan described everything that had happened. The whistles. The footprints. The figure outside the window. The mysterious phone call. Walter remained silent for a long time after Ethan finished speaking. Finally, the old man sighed heavily. You answered it. Ethan nodded. Walter closed his eyes. You should have listened. What is it? Ethan asked. Walter stared toward the distant hills where Black Hollow disappeared into endless forest. No one really knows. There has to be something. My grandfather heard stories about it from his grandfather, Walter replied quietly. They said it wasn't a ghost. Then what was it? Walter's expression darkened. They believed it was something that learned how to become people. A cold chill traveled down Ethan's spine. It starts with voices, Walter continued. What do you mean? It listens. It learns how you sound. Then it learns how you think. Ethan swallowed hard. And after that? Walter looked away. For several seconds he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. No one knows what happens after that. That evening a powerful storm rolled across the Appalachian mountains. Heavy clouds swallowed the sky, and rain hammered rooftops throughout the valley. Thunder echoed across the hills while flashes of lightning illuminated the forests surrounding Black Hollow. Most people stayed indoors. Ethan spent the evening trying to distract himself with television. It didn't work. Every flash of lightning outside caused him to glance nervously toward the windows. Every distant sound made him tense. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the power went out. The television died instantly. The house fell silent. Dark. Cold. The only light came from occasional flashes of lightning beyond the windows. Then Ethan heard a sound from downstairs. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 His father stood from the couch. Who the hell is out there in this weather? Before anyone could move toward the door, a voice drifted through the storm from outside. A familiar voice. Ethan's voice. Dad? The entire room froze. Ethan's father slowly turned toward him. Ethan was standing across the room. Inside the house. Yet the voice had come from outside. Dad, help me. The words sounded perfect. Every syllable. Every breath. Every detail. Exactly like Ethan. No one moved. No one spoke. Another knock echoed through the house. Louder this time. Knock. 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 Dad. Lightning flashed. For the briefest moment, something became visible through the frosted glass beside the front door. A shadow. Tall. Far taller than any human being. Standing perfectly still. Waiting. Then the voice came again. Dad. There was something deeply wrong about it now. The thing outside knew Ethan's voice. It had mastered it. But as the storm raged around the house, Ethan realized it was learning something else. It was learning his family. And as another thunderous knock shook the front door, Ethan understood that the nightmare he had unleashed in Black Hollow was only beginning. Another knock thundered against the front door, rattling the entire house. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the darkness. Ethan's father stood motionless in the living room while Ethan and his mother stared at the entrance. Rain lashed against the windows, and lightning flashed beyond the glass, briefly illuminating the room before plunging it back into darkness. Then the voice came again. "Dad, please let me in." It was Ethan's voice. Perfectly Ethan's voice. Yet Ethan was standing 10 feet away from his father. No one spoke. No one moved. Every instinct in the room screamed that opening the door would be a terrible mistake. The knocking stopped. For several long seconds there was only the sound of rain. Then something began walking around the outside of the house. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy footsteps crunched through the wet grass. The sound moved from the front porch to the side of the house. Then toward the back. The entire family listened in silence. Whatever was outside wasn't trying to get in anymore. It was circling. Studying. Learning. Ethan's mother whispered a prayer under her breath. His father gripped a flashlight so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The footsteps continued for nearly 5 minutes before finally fading into the distance. No one slept that night. When dawn finally arrived, Ethan and his father stepped outside to inspect the property. The storm had passed. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. At first everything appeared normal. Then they found the footprints. They surrounded the house. Dozens of them. Deep impressions pressed into the soaked ground. The tracks circled every wall, every window, every entrance. As though something had spent hours walking around the property. Watching. And waiting. Ethan's father crouched beside one of the footprints. Neither man said a word. The print was nearly twice the length of a normal human foot. Long. Narrow. Almost skeletal. The same tracks Ethan had discovered beneath his bedroom window. His father slowly stood. His face had become pale. "I haven't seen these since I was a kid." Ethan looked at him. "You've seen them before?" His father hesitated. Then nodded. "When I was 12. The answer shocked Ethan. For years his father had dismissed every conversation about Black Hollow. Now, for the first time, he seemed willing to talk. "What happened?" His father stared toward the distant tree line. "There was a boy named Jacob Mercer." Ethan had never heard the name. "He lived about 3 miles from here." His father swallowed hard. One night he heard the whistle. Ethan already knew where the story was going. He answered it. His father nodded. "What happened to him?" For several moments the older man remained silent. Then he quietly said, "Nobody knows." Ethan felt a chill. "What do you mean nobody knows?" "He disappeared." The words hung heavily in the morning air. His father continued. "They searched for 2 weeks. Hundreds of volunteers. State police. Dogs. Helicopters. And they never found him." Ethan stared at the footprints surrounding the house. His father looked genuinely afraid. More afraid than Ethan had ever seen him. 3 days before he vanished, his father continued, Jacob told people he kept hearing someone calling his name outside at night. Ethan's stomach tightened. He said the voice sounded exactly like his own. Neither of them spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. The similarities were impossible to ignore. That afternoon Ethan began reviewing old newspaper archives at the local library. At first he found nothing. Then, buried inside a faded article from 1972, he discovered Jacob Mercer's name. The article described a missing child. 12 years old. Last seen near Black Hollow. No evidence. No suspects. No explanation. Ethan continued searching. The deeper he looked, the stranger things became. Jacob wasn't the only one. Over the decades, several disappearances had occurred around Black Hollow. Not enough to attract national attention. Not enough to make headlines outside the county. But enough to form a pattern. Hunters. Campers. Hikers. A few local residents. Most vanished without explanation. And nearly every case shared one detail. Witnesses reported hearing strange whistles shortly before the disappearance. As the afternoon faded into evening, Ethan sat alone in the library reading reports that stretched back nearly 70 years. One particular account caught his attention. The statement came from a retired park ranger named Samuel Price. The report was dated October 1964. In it, Samuel described responding to complaints about strange sounds deep inside Black Hollow. According to the report, he entered the forest shortly after sunset. At first he heard only whistles. Then voices. Voices belonging to people he knew. His wife. His brother. His friends. All calling from different directions. The report ended abruptly. Samuel wrote only one final sentence before refusing further interviews. It knew things it should not have known. Ethan read the sentence 3 times. Something about it disturbed him more than everything else. Because it suggested the entity wasn't merely copying voices. It understood the people it copied. As darkness approached, Ethan finally left the library. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every stretch of forest seemed darker. Every shadow felt alive. Halfway home he noticed something in his rearview mirror. A figure. Standing beside the road. Tall. Motionless. Watching his truck pass. Ethan slammed on the brakes. The tires skidded across the pavement. His heart raced as he looked back. The roadside was empty. Nothing stood there. No person. No animal. Nothing at all. Yet he knew what he had seen. The same impossible height. The same unnatural silhouette. The same figure from the video. His hands trembled as he continued driving. That night the whistle returned. Not outside. Inside. At exactly 2:13 in the morning, Ethan woke to the sound. A soft whistle drifting through the darkness of the house. His eyes opened instantly. The sound seemed distant at first. Then it came again. Closer. Somewhere downstairs. Ethan sat upright in bed. Every muscle in his body tensed. The whistle sounded once more. Then he heard something else. A voice. His mother's voice. Ethan? His blood turned cold. The voice came from downstairs. Ethan, come here. For a moment he almost responded. Then he remembered something. His parents' bedroom was on the opposite side of the second floor. There was no reason for his mother to be downstairs at 2 in the morning. The voice called again. Ethan? It sounded frightened. Desperate. As if she needed help. Ethan climbed out of bed and quietly opened his bedroom door. The hallway beyond was dark. Silent. He slowly stepped forward. Then he froze. At the far end of the hallway stood a figure. Tall. Thin. Impossible. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. The darkness concealed most of its features, but Ethan could tell one thing immediately. It wasn't human. The figure stood perfectly still. Watching him. Then, from somewhere inside the darkness where its face should have been, came his mother's voice. Ethan, come downstairs. A smile spread across the silhouette. A smile far too wide to belong to any person. And then the thing took its first step toward him. Ethan's body locked in place as the towering figure stepped forward from the darkness of the hallway. Every instinct told him to run, yet fear rooted him to the floor. The thing continued to smile with a grin that seemed impossibly wide, while his mother's voice echoed from somewhere deep inside it. For a brief moment, Ethan understood what the old stories had been trying to warn people about all these years. The whistles were never the true danger. The whistles were only the invitation. Whatever lived in Black Hollow did not hunt with claws or teeth. It hunted with curiosity. It listened. It learned. It copied. First your voice. Then your habits. Then your fears. And eventually, perhaps, your very identity. The stories passed down through generations were not meant to entertain children around campfires. They were warnings left behind by those who had encountered something they could neither understand nor defeat. What happened to Ethan Carter after that night remains uncertain. Some versions of the legend claim he survived and left West Virginia forever, refusing to speak about Black Hollow again. Others insist he disappeared shortly afterward, becoming just another name added to a long list of unexplained vanishings connected to the forest. And there are those who believe something far worse happened, that Ethan did make it out, but the thing that returned was no longer entirely Ethan. To this day, residents living near Black Hollow still follow the old rule. If a whistle drifts out of the forest after sunset, they lock their doors, close their curtains, and remain silent. Because deep within the Appalachian wilderness, there are places where something may be listening. Something patient. Something intelligent. Something waiting for a voice to answer. And if you ever find yourself alone in the mountains of West Virginia, surrounded by dark trees and endless silence, remember this story. If you hear a whistle calling from somewhere deep in the woods, no matter how harmless it sounds, no matter how familiar it seems, do not whistle back. Because the moment it learns your voice, it may never stop looking for you. Thank you for joining us for tonight's story. If you enjoy horror stories, Appalachian legends, paranormal encounters, and terrifying mysteries based on American folklore, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new nightmare. Until next time, stay safe, keep the lights on, and whatever you do, don't answer the whistle.